Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience so far with Gentoo Linux and everything that I've done with Gentoo Linux up to this point. So I actually already have a Gentoo Linux installation guide published on this channel already. So definitely go check that video out. You're going to want to follow along with that. But also, let's just jump into, I'm just basically just going to go over a whole overview of everything I've done with it so far. And just give my thoughts on Gentoo. So let's just jump into it. I started out with the quick install VM. Now I basically followed the quick install guide and installed it on a VM just to get started. And then I installed on real hardware later on. So this was a Proxmox VM on a Mac Mini. So the VM itself had 4 CPU cores and 6 gigs of RAM allocated. And I used the quick install guide, which it says not to rely on it, especially for your first time installing, but it worked out for me. Really, you're supposed to go through the whole handbook first and then install it, but I just went through the quick install guide. I went through the handbook later on with my next installation, but for this first install, I just used the quick install guide. They don't recommend it, and I wouldn't recommend it. You should probably know a little bit more about what you're doing. There are some things that would have been helpful to know when I had done this the first time, and there are some differences there. So, any case, yeah, so I haven't found Gentoo difficult at all. I was successful on my first shot, but I guess that's probably because I've been, building Linux from scratch multiple times in the past, and I kind of have some experience with it, so it kind of went pretty quickly. A lot of people apparently go through a lot of trial and error and have problems with it. I was kind of expecting to have some problems, but I didn't. In any case, and maybe that's just luck. But yeah, so I used a custom kernel, but it was generated based off of the settings from the install media. So the kernel settings from the install media, I just said grab these settings and use those. So I did kind of cheat with that. So like I took the easy way out. But in any case, that was my first installation on a VM. Now, after that, I followed the handbook. And I basically went through the whole handbook, took a bunch of notes, and threw together my own version of an installation guide. Check the link in the description for that. And I used that version of my own version of the installation instructions to, record a video showing how to actually install Gentoo Linux and what worked for me. I basically went through a whole demo on how to install it. That's the video I just mentioned before. So yeah, definitely check that video out. But in any case, yeah, so that was a desktop install. I installed it on a desktop PC, and it has the CPU has 8 cores and it has 32 gigs of RAM, and I have an NVIDIA GTX 1080 in there, which kind of doesn't quite match the CPU and they're different generations. They're years apart, but it's the GPU I had to throw in there, just a spare GPU, and that's actually this PC behind me lit up in green. Actually, that system has 5 hard drives in it. So I'm running Ubuntu, Arch, Gentoo, Linux from scratch, and Windows 11 all in that one box. So it's like a quintuple boot box. Any case, so yeah, installed Gentoo on that, and it was a basic install, but I selected the Plasma OpenRC profile and same thing, Plasma OpenRC Stage 3 Tarball. So I did select the dist kernel for this because I felt like it would just be easier when I want to do, because I'm still getting used to the package manager, how to build things and how to update things, and I want the kernel to I want to be able to update to the latest kernel really quickly and easily without poking around with too much. I may look into custom kernels later on. I've built them in the past, but not with Gentoo. But for now, I just wanted something that kind of works with the existing package manager and existing update system. So I kind of wanted it to be like a seamless process. So although I feel like that kind of is cheating, and one of the big things people like to do is build the kernel. But in any case, so I do have an NVIDIA GPU in there. So yeah, I'm basically stuck with the open source drivers for now, which apparently the handbook recommends, or one of the wiki pages linked to in the handbook recommend the open source drivers. they don't perform as well as the proprietary drivers though. So realistically, you're better off with the proprietary drivers. I haven't installed them yet. I have installed them on the hard drive that has Ubuntu, and they did provide me with a whole lot more performance running games and stuff. If you're not running games, in my experience so far, it doesn't really matter if you have the open source or the proprietary drivers. But for Gentoo, I'm going with the open source drivers for now. The plan is in the future to upgrade to the proprietary drivers. I might make a video on that too. So yeah, anyways, yeah, that's everything with the base system. But then I installed X11. Now there's a lot of instructions around drivers, installing X Windows, and tons of things you have to do. Check that certain things are enabled in your kernel and a ton of other settings. Now most of that you really don't have to deal with. So long as you followed like the main instructions, it did like a simple, straightforward installation, you probably won't have any issue. I had meant to go back and go through every single little detail and document everything perfectly in the future. But for now, what I did was I basically ignored most of the documentation details and kernel configs, things that you need in there. It was mostly fine anyways, because the profile that I selected and the tarball and the kernel selections, everything I selected was what you should select if you want to go for X11 later on. So I really didn't have to go through and recompile my kernel and enable anything else or mess around with anything. It basically just worked almost out of the box. So no, I basically was able to install X11 pretty quickly. So basically I had to install a package or two, and I also had to install a super minimal window manager just to test it out, just to prove that I could get X started up. Because if you start X, you actually need to start at least some application for it to stay running. And yeah, basically I installed TWM and Xterm. So basically a couple X Windows related packages, TWM and Xterm, I had to install with emerge, and I made some tiny config edits. I think there was one, maybe two config files that I had to edit. I'm gonna have to go back through my history and see what I changed and document it. But really tiny edits. I had to just select a few minor things. It was pretty quick and easy and painless. I was actually surprised at how painless this was, especially compared to the rest of the install. It is a relatively detailed installation process, and this was relatively simple compared to all the rest of the stuff you do in the installation process. Now, any case, after installing X11, I went ahead and installed KDE with SSDM, because I feel like SSDM is the correct it's the correct thing to install with KDE. So I have KDE Plasma installed in there, and it took a while to build, but it wasn't anything too crazy. It was even Firefox and Chromium took way longer to install than KDE. So it did take some time, but it wasn't like going for days or anything. So yeah, it was just a few easy commands and a few configs to edit. Very similar to X Windows. A similar amount of effort. It wasn't too hard at all. So basically just follow the documentation. A lot of the extra steps and details are just there to be complete. You don't really have to do all of it. You really should go through all of it, but you can kind of just skim through and install it pretty quickly. That's not recommended, but that's kind of what I did. And yeah, so yeah, a lot of extra information in the docs you don't need. Now, one issue I found right away when I started up SSDM is there's a little bit of flickering on the login screen, but no other real issues. Like when you move the mouse over one part of the login screen, it flickers a little bit. I haven't looked into why that is, but that was one issue that came up. Not a real issue, but it's kind of, I feel like it's a thing that shouldn't be there. So in any case, that's one flaw. So after installing KDE and SSDM, I ended up with both X11 and Wayland. So it looks as though KDE pulled in Wayland as a prerequisite, and both of these worked. So I had trouble with Wayland on the same host when booting an Arch. So on that host, if I boot off of the Arch, off of the hard drive I have Arch installed in, I also have both Wayland and X11 installed on there. So by default, Arch was, it had Wayland selected, and when I log in with the Wayland, it was just crashing right away. But when I log in with X11, no problem. So basically needed X for Arch, and I haven't gotten around to investigating and fixing Wayland yet. Maybe if I update it, it will work now. But in any case, with Gentoo, no problem. Both Wayland and X11 work great. One thing I've noticed is a little bit of screen tearing. I'm not sure if that's an X11 thing, a configuration thing, or what. I haven't investigated what I'd need to do to fix that, but usually just, it's basically when you scroll up and down through a large document in a browser, the screen tears a little bit. I can barely notice it, but it does. That's with X11. Now with Wayland, the screen is scaled down a little bit more, and the windows don't snap to the side the same way I don't know why that is. It should behave, KDE should behave the same way in Wayland or X, but in any case, in Wayland, they don't snap to the side the way they normally do with X, so that's one difference. But other than that, they both work fine. None of them crash. Wayland doesn't crash, and they both work smoothly. So that was kind of nice. I've mostly been sticking with X, but I kind of feel like I might want to try Wayland and poke around with that a little bit. So yeah, they both worked great on Gentoo. Not a whole lot else I wanted to talk about in terms of KDE and SDM, but the next thing, I installed Chromium and Firefox. Now these took a really long time to build, and I think they took like 6 hours or more, but that's because I installed both of them together, so I imagine it's like 3 hours each, assuming they each took the same amount of time. I'm not sure which took the most time, but I ran emerge and just passed the name of both Chromium and Firefox. So one thing I found is that Chromium no longer will sync with Google, and I kind of wanted my bookmarks, so I decided to also install Google Chrome. Now, I installed regular Google Chrome, and this went super fast because it's a proprietary binary, and it isn't built from source. So Chrome has actually been running a little bit laggy for me on Gentoo. It works great on Ubuntu running the binary package, but on Gentoo for some reason it's running slowly. Chromium though, Chromium runs really smooth, no lag at all, nice and snappy. Chrome, for whatever reason, it lags. Like when I type things into the URL bar, it lags as I start typing. Like, you know how you type and it starts searching for recommended things, it lags there. It lags when I'm loading web page. It lags basically doing everything really, for some reason. But I still use it for saved passwords and you know, for things that I do save my passwords on. Not that I do that with everything, and for bookmarks. And I'm actually kind of thinking of migrating off of that and, you know, putting them on something that I could sync up with either Chromium or Firefox. Haven't decided what I want to do with that yet, but I'm always switching between different systems, between, like, you know, my Mac, multiple different Linux distros, and a Windows, and, you know, like Windows machines and all sorts of different things. You know, my iPhone, Android phones. So then I kind of want to keep my bookmarks and all my stuff in sync. So it's kind of an issue. But in any case, yeah, that was my experience with web browsers on Gentoo. So I built a few other packages, actually a lot of packages up to this point. Installed some things like Blender and the GIMP and a few other things just to get started. I installed Simple Screen Recorder, and it wasn't quite working out for me. It didn't have the functionality I wanted. I couldn't adjust the window exactly the way I wanted and it just wasn't behaving the way I wanted. I couldn't adjust it to the exact dimensions I wanted. And I kind of thought about OBS. I may do that at some point, but for now, I just installed the Voco Screen. And Voco Screen is what I've been using on other Linux distros like Ubuntu, and it's been working great for me, and I kind of like the tool. It's nice and simple. It doesn't have all the features of OBS, but it's just really simple and it works great, so I've been using that. So it's actually Voco Screen NG. But in any case, to get that working, I actually decided, I forget the rationale, but I came to the decision that I wanted to install that through a Flatpak rather than building it with emerge. And so I went ahead and installed Flatpak. So I used emerge to install Flatpak. And actually, I believe that's how I got that on there. But in any case, I got Flatpak installed and working on Gentoo. And that's actually pretty cool. I hadn't used that tool on any other distro before, but yeah, it is pretty cool. I actually like it a lot, and it's a pretty neat tool. Once I started getting familiar with the different commands and the different ways you can use it, it is pretty neat, and I was pretty happy with Flatpak. I used that to install Voco Screen. Haven't really installed anything else with it yet, but I probably will. Also, since it's a KDE system, I basically just been installing a lot of KDE apps for anything I need. You know, if I'm looking for an application for something, I'm just going with the KDE version of it, even though it runs GNOME apps and everything else just fine. What else? So yeah, Flatpak's amazing, really neat tool. Vocal screen's working great. And yeah, I think that's about it. So yeah, leave a comment down below with your experiences. If you've been using Gentoo Linux yourself, leave a comment down below. We want to know what you think, what you've been doing, what your experience has been. And if you know something I don't know, leave a comment down below for that too. Questions, comments, criticisms, whatever you want to say, we want to hear it. So do leave a comment down below. You're gonna probably want to give us a thumbs up and definitely hit the subscribe button, because we have a lot of great content coming up. We've been doing a lot of like Gentoo, Arch Linux stuff, a lot of Linux stuff in general, a lot of services, databases, web servers. I'm going to be automating. I've actually put together a script to automate Arch Linux installs and built a custom Arch Linux installation ISO. I'm going to probably be doing the same thing with Gentoo too. So stay tuned for those videos. I'm going to be coming out with those soon. Doing a lot of stuff with like Raspberry Pis, coding, Python, Golang, all sorts of excellent like coding and tech related stuff, robots, electronics, Raspberry Pis, networking, 3D printing. I have a 3D printer, Creality, right up there on the shelf above my head. You can see that in the video right there. It's a little bit blurred. I think the background is blurred based on the preview of the video here in front of me. But yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of 3D printing related stuff and just a lot of tech stuff in general. So you're going to want to stay tuned for all of that. You don't want to miss out. So hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Otherwise, YouTube's not going to let you know when we come out with new videos. And yeah, definitely don't miss out. So I think that's pretty much it for today. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on that next video.